never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world and right on time. Oh, never in my life have I seen the sky light up like this. I'm far away from Earth and I wanna know if you exist. Mission control, do you read me? Send me my coordinates lately. Mission control, am I drifting? Tie me to someone who will love me, yeah. Wait, I think I'll last a bit longer, fine.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. I hope to see some of you later on today at 6687 Highway 72 West Colbert, Georgia, for Ultimate Wrestling Federation. Doors open at 4 o'clock. Bell time is 4:30. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything on yesterday's college football action, please feel free to let me know. Hard to believe that after yesterday's games, we only have 2 more Saturdays left in the regular season. 3 more Saturdays if you count championship weekend coming up the first weekend in December. And then, of course, Army-Navy play their solo game coming up in mid-December. But that is 1 game and 1 game only. I'm talking about as far as all-day college football on Saturday. We have 2 more to go. Texas A&M defeated Mississippi State 51-10. Now, I heard this past week that more than likely Mississippi State was going to fire their head coach after the season, and they do look brutally bad, but you can't blame them for giving the guy the job when Mike Leach just died suddenly. You really couldn't go on a coaching search. They tried this guy, and I don't think it has worked at all. A lot of folks still want Texas A&M to fire Jimbo Fisher, and you know me, I've never been a Jimbo Fisher fan. I say he is just a 8-4 head coach. That's what he is. But this is their first year with Petrino calling plays on offense, and their offense has looked better. So if they bring Petrino and Jimbo back next year, it's probably going to look even better. But I just do not think Jimbo Fisher is nothing but an 8-4, 9-3 coach. That's what he is. Cincinnati gets their first win as a member of the Big 12 by defeating Houston 24-14. I think they were 0-6 in league play going into that game yesterday, so the Bearcats finally get a Big 12 conference win. California has looked a little bit better this year after being so awful the last couple of years. They defeat Washington State 42-39. Then we had Auburn all over Arkansas 48-10, and I think it's obvious that even though he is a scumbag and scum of the earth and as low as they go, that Hugh Freeze has already turned Auburn around. So look out for Auburn in the next couple of years. As bad as I hate to say it, I can feel my skin crawl as I say that. Syracuse defeats Pittsburgh 28-13. And I tell you, Pat Narduzzi is a good head coach, but it's hard to believe that Pittsburgh is this bad, but they are 2-8 this year, I think, and they are absolutely dreadful on offense. Purdue defeats Minnesota 49-10. to 30. And the only reason I even bring that game up is because this whole Michigan scandal going on, they're not denying that they're guilty, but they're doing everything they can to deflect attention to somebody else. They showed some of their film to Purdue. And then Michigan later on come out and said, well, if we're guilty, then Purdue is too. But the difference is Purdue sucks. Memphis defeats Charlotte 44-38. I think Memphis scored 59 last week and 44 yesterday. So you talk about an offense that's playing good right now. It's definitely the Memphis Tigers. NC State defeats Wake Forest 26-6. And in case you missed it, I mentioned it earlier in the week that NC State actually benched Brennan Armstrong and they went with MJ Morris. MJ Morris played 4 games, and of course that's the most you can play before you lose your red shirt. Well, last Saturday was his 4th game as a starter, and then on Monday he informed his coaching staff and his teammates that he was not playing the rest of the year. He wanted to preserve his red shirt, so NC State had to go back to Brennan Armstrong. Of course, it didn't matter yesterday because Wake Forest is just pitiful. But that has to tell you that MJ Morris is transferring. I just don't see any way possible that you quit on your team in the middle of the season when you've gone 3-1 as a starting quarterback and the offense has actually looked some better with you under center. And then all of a sudden you come back in February and say, well, y'all ready for next year? I just don't see that happening. So MJ Morris has to be transferring. But when a player comes out and says that, there's nothing the coaching staff can do. You can't make them play. Clemson defeats Georgia Tech 42-21. It was definitely the best that Clemson has looked on offense, I would say, all year long. Maybe the Duke game, but of course the Duke game, you had so many turnovers. Nobody looked at what your stats were because you only scored 7 points. But yesterday you had 200-plus rushing, 200-plus passing. They were in a groove. I'm not going to say all game long. I'll say late first quarter on. Early in the game, they looked pitiful, but by late first quarter on, their offense was in rhythm. And they were up 42-7, and Georgia Tech scored 2 touchdowns late. The defense has been good all year long, with the offense is finally coming around. And most of the big plays yesterday on both sides of the ball came from freshmen. So it just tells you what the future holds for Clemson. And that's one of the reasons why they don't use the portal a lot. Now, there's this false narrative that Dabo refuses to use the portal, and that's not true. That could not be more false, but people still say that, and if people want to be wrong, you can't change their mind. He actually tried this past year to bring in a portal player at 3 different positions, and all 3 players told him no. So it's not like he didn't use the portal. He was just told no. But they don't get to use it like most teams do because after last year, even though supposedly Clemson's in a downward spiral, they only had like 4 or 5 players transferred. And the players that transferred were backups and third-string guys that were never going to play. Clemson's just not one of those teams that has 15, 20 players transferred. They don't. The kids love playing for Dabo, so they just don't transfer. And they're one of the few schools that most of their players stay all the way through their senior year. They don't leave early for the draft. They stay their whole career. So it's hard to use the portal a lot when you don't really have a lot of positions to use the portal. But I think they'll be fine in the long run, but they definitely looked good yesterday on both sides of the ball. Virginia Tech all over Boston College, 48-0. 22. South Carolina all over Vanderbilt, 47-6. And poor Vanderbilt, boy, they are awful. I just wonder if they're going to fire their head coach since they're not making any progress at all. When he first got the job, they looked like they were getting better, but not this year. Maryland defeats Nebraska 13-10. Illinois defeats Indiana in a high-scoring game that you don't see a whole lot in the Big Ten, 48-45. Kansas State defeats Baylor 59-25. Tulane defeats Tulsa 24-22. And the only reason I bring that game up is because Tulane is currently ranked. So as of right now, they would be the Group of 5 team going to a New Year's Six bowl game. I believe that James Madison has filed an appeal with the NCAA to let them go to a bowl game, which they should get to go to a bowl game. There's no reason why they shouldn't get to go to one. And James Madison is playing really, really good football. So if their appeal goes through, James Madison might be the Group of 5 team going to a New Year's Six bowl game. But right now, it would be Tulane. Iowa defeats Rutgers 22-0. And I think it's the first time this year that Iowa's offense had 400 total yards. Arizona defeats Colorado 34-31. And boy, ain't it funny how the shine and the luster just fell off of Colorado, and I could not be more happy. They were acting like Deion Sanders was so great when the man won nothing. But now all of a sudden, the Colorado might not go to a bowl game, and all this Colorado Deion Sanders talk has ended. LSU defeats Florida 52-35. Oklahoma all over West Virginia 59-20. In a small upset, Texas Tech defeats Kansas 16-13. And I say small because Kansas was ranked, I believe, 16th, so they weren't no top 10 team. But Texas Tech was supposed to be really good this year, but they started out the season by losing 3 games they had no business losing, but they have slowly gotten better as the year has went on. And another upset and a complete total blowout, Central Florida defeats Oklahoma State 45-3. And another upset and a complete total blowout, Missouri all over Tennessee 36-7. I know most people thought that Missouri would win the game because Tennessee's offense is not near as good this year as it was last year. But Tennessee's defense has actually been a lot better this year. So I thought Missouri would win, but I thought it would be something like 27-17, 27-21, 24-14, somewhere along in there. But 36-7. Oregon State over Stanford 62-17. And because of Oregon and Washington, Oregon State doesn't get talked about, but they're quietly 8-2 on the season. Alabama all over Kentucky 49-21. Texas over TCU 29-26. Washington defeats Utah 35-28. Florida State over their arch nemesis, arch rival, Miami, 27-20. So it was a lot closer than I think anybody thought it would be, but Florida State stays undefeated. Michigan defeats Penn State 24-15 for some stupid reason. Penn State scored a touchdown in the second quarter and went for 2 and didn't get it. So, of course, when they scored late in the game, they went for 2 and didn't get it. So, instead of 24-17, it's 24-15. But I've never liked the idea of going for 2 in the second quarter and start chasing points, especially when the other team is not blowing you out. I understand if it's second quarter, it's already, Michigan 33, Penn State 3. But when it's a 1 or 2 score game in the second quarter, I don't see why you go for 2, but they did it. Georgia all over Ole Miss, 52-17. Ohio State all over Michigan State, 38-3. North Carolina in double overtime defeats Duke, 47-45. Oregon defeats USC, 36-27. And Iowa State defeats BYU, 45-13. And USC fires their defensive coordinator, and last night you couldn't tell any different. The only reason they fired the last guy was not because their defense sucks, because Lincoln Riley doesn't care. It's because there was a video that surfaced last week where after a timeout, the defense was leaving the huddle, and Alex Grinch puts his hand in and wants all the players to put their hand in the huddle, and all 11 guys just walk off. So when that happens, that tells you whatever the DC is doing and saying, it ain't happening. So that's the only reason why he got fired. But they still give up 36 yesterday. And Oregon does have one loss, but they are the highest ranked one-loss team, and they have looked better and better as the year has went on. And Jim Harbaugh has been suspended for the final 3 games of the regular season. But if Michigan makes it to the Big Ten championship game, he'll coach that. If they go to the playoffs, he'll coach that. They still have not came out and said, we're not guilty. They're just trying to deflect blame to Purdue, or trying to say Harbaugh's being mistreated, different things, but they still have never come out and said, hey, we didn't do this. One thing that makes them look really guilty was that there was proof that they sent the Connor Stalions guy to 10 games last year, and it was teams either on their schedule or teams they might face in the playoffs, and the only team that we know for sure, we have no proof that Connor Stalions didn't go to their game, was TCU. And that was because up until the final weekend, nobody thought TCU was going to the playoffs. So Connor Stalions does not go to the TCU game, and Michigan plays them and gives up 50 plus. So that makes you look like you're kind of guilty. The other thing that makes them look guilty, and nobody talks about it, but if you go back to the 2020 season, that was the season where a lot of teams, a lot of conferences shut their season down. And Michigan was one of those teams. If I'm not mistaken, they were 2-4 when their season got shut down with losses to Rutgers and a couple other teams they had no business losing to. And it's hard to believe that you go from being 2-4, losing to Rutgers, to being a top 5 team in the very next season. But all Michigan's trying to do is let Harbaugh get suspended, come back for the playoffs. Michigan hopes to win a national championship, and then the very next morning, at the crack of dawn before the sun comes up, Jim Harbaugh leaves to go to the NFL, and the whole thing gets dropped, and nothing happens. Because Connor Stalions has already resigned, quit, whatever words you want to use. So if Harbaugh leaves for the NFL, which he will, then this whole thing gets dropped. But I'm not convinced anything happens anyway, because Michigan is a blue blood, and blue bloods normally in any collegiate sport don't get in trouble. If you recall a few years back, when North Carolina basketball was still coached by Roy Williams, they came out and basically admitted that they pretty much had stupid players on their team that couldn't go to school and pass their classes. So North Carolina made up classes and gave their basketball players passing grades in these classes that didn't exist, just so they could play basketball, and pretty much their almost entire roster was illegal players, and nothing got done because North Carolina is a blue blood in basketball. Michigan is a blue blood in football. I'm not convinced anything happens. It's fun to talk about. It's fun to see where it goes. But I think outside of the Harbaugh suspension, I don't know if anything else happens. But with him being suspended at the beginning of the season for another situation, and now the end of the season, he's basically missed more games than he's going to coach this year. Homes for Our Troops is a publicly funded 501c nonprofit organization that builds and donates specially adapted custom homes nationwide for severely injured post 9/11 veterans. Since the 2004 inception, nearly 90 cents of every dollar spent has gone directly to our program services for veterans. Visit at hfotusa.org. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. What do you call two pigs playing tug of war? Pulled pork. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of three. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.